come through.
Yeah. All right. So yeah. So thank you, Shane. There's the voice already.
Yeah.
So part of what this is an experiment. I don't know. This is a podcast. I'm not even sure what it is, what it's called yet. Yeah. You and I, like we talked about, I thought Occam's toothbrush would be fun. You don't know who Occam is. So that was kind of like, maybe it's not really super specific. But there's something playful in it, and something like Occam's razor is an idea that is here in philosophical circles of slicing down the irrelevant to be left with the relevant. That's kind of what Occam's razor is about.
Right.
And
in my mind, here's what we know, which is we're two facilitators of a practice that teaches participants, or where we practice having great conversations that connect people into a more intimate space, into a more curious, and what we found together is that when we talk, it's just from what we've practiced, our conversations get so exciting that we're like, we got to record this.
Yeah.
And maybe a lot of people are like, what is this circling thing? And we're going to say things that people don't really understand, but that hopefully people will be like, I don't understand everything they're saying, but I'm getting something from it. And the people that do know what we're talking about is like, oh, this is, I'm putting pieces together. So, yeah. Anyways, I
love that. There's something what we have talked about just before we hit record was is one, how to be aware that you and I are still having a conversation.
Yeah.
This is a presentation to some audience, even though it will possibly be a presentation to some audience. That's not primarily what it is. It's primarily a conversation between you and me. It's a podcast, and I'm the host and you're the guest. So that's normally like I ask you questions, but your proposal to ask me questions feels really good, like interviewing me. I have some really interesting stuff to say, in part because you know what you know about some of this material, because I've done some talks as part of the theory portion of Monday Night Lab on Circle Anywhere, on Circle, and that is an interesting context. There's some stuff there. What just came to me as you said that is like interview with the Oracle. Like I'm the host, I'm the Oracle. Ask me your questions. And it's like, I don't know what that means. There's something almost too arrogant about that, but also playful about it. And that the way that this question comes up, you're really looking at how does the Oracle work, as well as what is my interaction with this? Because a lot of what comes up in me, my circling practice has come to really attune to what's in the context of the conversation that we're having.
Right. And I guess there's like a whole arrogance. I could see the whole viewpoint of like, there's an arrogance of like, we're going to record this conversation because look how smart we are. But the way I'm seeing it is you've taken this thing that we all just say, trust. We just say trust. We feel like, oh, I get what I'm saying when I say trust. When somebody else says trust, we're like, oh, I get what you're saying. And you decided to deconstruct it. Not everybody wants to take the path of like really understanding what trust is, where it comes from. You took on this task. You're interested in this, and you just found interesting things from this. Not everybody wants to break it down or do all that work, and it's cool to kind of get the insights that you've gotten from that. And so I kind of want to jump in. So you're writing this book, Trust is Technology. Already, that's kind of like trust is a technology. That's it, and you like kind of want to playfully tease people with the title. I'm curious, like, what is trust to you?
So I'll it's a big question, but the succinct answer, you and I both have experienced circling in the Circling Europe style, and they have as a principle, trust and experience. I think it sometimes says trust in your experience, but trust and experience is a more pure example of that. And it's like, when hearing that phrase, what does that even mean? There's that's kind of where the inquiry started. I was like, I don't know quite what that means. Does that mean if I think that you're lying, that trust that you're lying?
Right.
And then the question comes a little bit more subtle. No, trust that my experience is as if you're lying. That doesn't mean that it's true that you're lying, but it is true that my experience is it feels like you're lying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, so what is that? What do I do with that then? And there's something
Right.
that comes up as I want to hide, or I want to ask you more questions.
It's kind of like this whole interesting thing of when people throw around the word gaslighting.
Yeah.
It's strange because it's like, I don't quite know how to respond, because this person that is using this term, hey, you're gaslighting me. It's like, I don't want to be invalidating your experience. And I think people that you just say, hey, you're gaslighting me, they've tended to live a life where they were constantly invalidated. And they're stepping into this role of, I'm no longer going to allow myself to be invalidated. And I'm going to take this feeling and say, my intuition is calling me to something, and I'm no longer going to ignore it.
Mm.
And there's like a funny thing of, okay, well, how does that interact with my experience that disagrees?
Right.
You're telling me that I'm gaslighting you. And now it's kind of like, how does my different experience interact with yours without me being one of the people that continually says, don't listen to your intuition. I want you to listen to your intuition.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is beautiful. There's something like one layer of it is my experience is you're gaslighting me.
Mm-hmm.
Your experience is possibly defensiveness and incredulity. What? I'm not gaslighting you. How am I gaslighting you? Our experience together is this dance of how do we negotiate this moment where it feels like gaslighting is happening, but we can't find the source of it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's a very subtle thing. It is very tempting to point at the two people in the room.
Yeah.
Oh, it's David's fault or it's Shane's fault. Yeah, that's one of them is doing it. Or maybe both of them are doing some pattern together. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. Who else is here?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot here that's not just us.
It's almost like a common cause, I think, I see in conflict is we've grown up for 18 years with a certain family. I mean, for other people's more or less or not at all. But like for me, it was 18 years with a certain family, which has a certain context. There's all these like implicit rules that I got used to. And that 18 years is interacting with someone else's 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it causes all this confusion. And so if I lived a life where, hey, we as a family have to agree with what's going on and shut up, don't tell us what your gut feeling is, then it's like those things are like turn into, oh, this is gaslighting. I need someone to agree, but I can't have my own experience. Whereas in a hyper individualistic family, it's like we all have our experience, and like it's kind of like the opposite side. We don't really listen to each other, but we also like just trust ourselves, and there's no communication. And so these two different types of people get together, and there's like a clash, and both of them are kind of confused. It's like, what?
Yeah. 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 A lot is coming up in me as you're speaking to that is like the curiosity of what the next thread is that's part of this. The strongest thing in me, like one, there's a sensation in my chest that's like I don't know, I don't have an interpretation for what it means, but it feels like somebody's pressing on on a spot about 3 inches above my solar plexus, above my sternum, and pressing in. So it has this pressure going in. It doesn't feel unpleasant, but it does feel like something firm and kind of a warning. It feels like a be careful where you tread. Is a verbalization that feels in the similar resonance. It's not perfect, but it's in that.
My best way of understanding what you're pointing to is like, there's us two in a conversation, but there's also this like third person, the person listening to the podcast. But that third person is also many people, and we don't know how this person who's listening is going to interpret what we're saying. Maybe we sound just like a bully that they once interacted with. Oh, we're saying the same things. We must agree that how this bully hurt them is right, or something. And has my heart go out, and it kind of freezes me if I try to take on this view of like, I need to make sure to not say anything that would hurt somebody. It's like, oh man, it feels so impossible.
I think it actually is impossible to not hurt anybody. And there's something about in the possibility that somebody may be hurt listening to this, that there's a tone of frivolity and joyousness, like, oh, look, we're slinging flaming mallets around and torching precious sacred relics in other people's lives. It's like, whoa.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's like I say the term gaslighting, and I'm like, there's a tone I have of, I've never experienced being gaslit. And so it's not quite close enough to anything like I felt hurt by for me to like speak about it in a sensitive manner. Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm surprised that you don't have the experience of having been gaslit or strong enough to be hurt. And I'm cautious here. I wonder if we can get semi-personal without naming any names, without looking at anything. But there's something like, I've seen moments where it feels like the feeling. So you tell me if this is an area that's off limits or not. But I've seen moments where there's something of a concern that the way that someone's speaking might portray an image that you will not have a voice in shaping after it's spoken. And some sense of hurtness and like wanting to withdraw and say, oh, if this is going to be, how I'm portrayed in this moment rings with more of the people here from that perspective, and I don't have a way to voice my side of it in a way that's going to, like, it just sounds defensive at this point. I don't have a way to speak about this that doesn't sound like I'm scared of their truth being more trustable, more believable than my own experience. So I'm just not going to say anything at all.
Wow. Yeah, there's a way it's like, feels like you're helping reframe the term for me. Where in my mind, gaslit was like, I don't quite trust my intuition, and I need like some kind of external source to look towards to know if my intuition is just like I ate something bad this morning, or if it's says something about something I'm seeing. There's just like a really strong trust in me. And more of the feedback that I get is that I trust myself too much, and I need to see from other people's point of view. And so that's something I'm kind of aware of, is coming from the opposite side of, okay, my work is to kind of understand someone else's view, more so than add even more trust to my own experience that it's arising. And so it's interesting. So you're talking about like these moments where it seems like, I'm not even sure what you're referring to, but this is a fun conversation for me to have. this seems like you're like, there's moments where I'm in a group and the group will frame whatever I'm doing and saying in a certain way that I don't feel is true to myself, but I'm unable to get out of their perceptions of me.
Mm-hmm.
It's weirdly enough, the only thing that comes up as I'm feeling it and like trying on it, hypothetical situation is like just excitement.
Mm.
There's a way all of these movies and dramas come into my mind that where I can resonate with the main character. It just feels like a matter of time for that my integrity will shine through.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And there's a sadness, I guess, as well. I don't quite know what the sadness is.
It's interesting. There's something like the flavor of this particular dance with the possibility of gaslighting. I know a handful of people who almost recoil at that even the thought, the suggestion that gaslighting is present in the room. Like, oh, hold on a minute. That's a serious accusation. Let's be really mindful about what are we doing? What are we doing here? Or like, well, I already don't trust you because gaslighting is such a potentially challenging way to be. You know, there's something that, oh boy, we could go in deep here and be very careful about this. Something in the realm of social justice, without saying social justice is right or wrong. There's something about the fierce righteousness that people who want to correct a wrong in the world can bring. It's like, here's a heavy tool. I know how to use this tool called gaslighting, this accusation of gaslighting, to possibly deplatform you in a way, right? Because what you've done is taken away the voice of less confident people, maybe, right? Your confidence, you've used, the accusation, you are hereby charged with wielding your confidence in such a way that less confident people cower. It's like, oh, well, I do have a lot of confidence. And I do know that when other people are less confident, my confidence is a warm blanket to me and a cold accusation to them, possibly. I mean, I'm putting more stuff in there. It's not the way that I intended for that to go. It's just the natural thing that comes out. But what comes up is the people, I don't know a lot about Enneagram, but my sense is that Enneagram 8s have a proclivity to that kind of a frame.
Right.
Yeah.
And for people who don't know Enneagram, it's a personality kind of test you could take online, figure out if you're one of these numbers 1 through 9. And I'm very high in 8, the challenger, which is issues with authority, or probably other 8s would describe it differently, because I guess we're all different in a way. But yes, like my kind of wanting to take action to keep my freedom, to keep my autonomy. So anything that threatens my autonomy, I feel stressed around. And so it's really cool that you brought up social justice too, because I had these complicated feelings that and I could feel like the danger of going into this, but there's also like, I feel like if I really make myself clear what my beliefs are around social justice, that I can't really see somebody getting angry towards me, which is probably, I also get surprised when people are angry at me. So that's just like showing places where I'm unaware. But it's my view on social justice and what's happening is it's kind of like this tapping into this anger and using this anger to fuel action taking. And I don't want it to stop. It's almost like a more woke version of the Spanish Inquisition. I mean, that's terrible, like murdering and all those things. That's really off of what they did. I don't think social justice is really doing that, like making somebody lose their job who's like uh, a rapist or something. That's not comparable to murder. There's a way that I think the energy of anger is just a complex power to tap into. I've had a lot of anger myself, and so it's like, okay, if I'm gonna use this anger to fuel it, it's like I simultaneously have to be very, very mindful. And so it's this is where I want to be careful with my words, because it's like I don't necessarily want to shut social justice down. Like, no, keep using this energy, because that's the only real like energy that I feel like is motivating towards action to stop something that is unjust. And simultaneously, I want to keep adding mindfulness, this kind of awareness of, and this ability to stay in integrity with like, okay, I'm not going to necessarily, sorry to give examples, but like necessarily just loot and destroy things. I know those people aren't necessarily, there's like they're like more there's people that masquerade as I'm part of social justice in order to loot. And so I get that there's like a distinction there, but there's still like this kind of energy that it's super powerful, and it could also lead in dark directions.
So fascinating. As I'm listening to you, I'm aware of the hot button topic issue-ness of this topic is really like dancing carefully. Like we're in a tinderbox here talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is righteous rage.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of doesn't care where the boundaries of its effectiveness or its harm are, right? Righteous rage kind of cares more about the corrective action than the possibility that there may be some innocent bystanders. There may be some collateral damage to this rage, but it's still necessary. The harm to not allowing this rage to speak is greater than the possibility that there may be some innocent bystanders who got swept up in the conflagration.
My understanding of what you're saying is the part of me that has rage doesn't care about hurting, but there's other parts of me that kind of keep it in balance.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're pointing to?
Yeah, it's interesting. On a personal level, the way it occurs to me, like if I imagine an intruder coming into my house at night and threatening my children, I feel sorry for the intruder because they're going to die, right? There's something like I'm not going to stop and ask them any questions. And I may fail in the attempt, but even imagining such a thing, I can't do anything but imagine that what I do is smash their head in.
Right.
And it's like, just get rid of the danger. Ask questions later, right? There's the feeling of that. And it's like, there's a part of that conflicts with a deeper compassionate side of myself. And it's like, this is no place for my compassion to get in the way of protecting what's holy and what's sacred to me, right?
And this is a common confusion point that I see with people in the practice that we facilitate, circling, which I know we mentioned that word multiple times, so it's a bit late now.
Well, we'll put it.
If you don't know what circling is,
we'll put something in the link. Yeah, I'll put something in the show notes then.
Yeah, there's a way. I'm going to context it, even if you already are going to context circling, which is that we're simultaneously practicing communication as we are practicing this kind of meditational awareness. And so just there, you're saying there's like a part of you that has this anger, and there's a part of you that's like, oh man, I sympathize with the person that I'm going to harm. And so there's this way that I think a lot of people get confused, because they would hear that this part of you wants to harm, they would think that's the whole you. And because I think we live in a society where a lot of people are identified with just a part of themselves, with just one feeling. I have anger, so I am the anger. And even me explaining this, it's like, I imagine a lot of people are like, what are you talking about, Shane? Obviously, it's my anger, so that is me. And there's a way we're trying to kind of lead people to realizing that they are the awareness. They're aware of anger. They're not the anger. If you're aware of that you're wearing a shirt, then you're obviously not the shirt. If you're the shirt, how could it see itself? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
I could see my own hand, but if I chopped off my hand, am I not me anymore? No, I'm still me. I'm just missing a hand.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I imagine that there are a lot of people who that framing speaks to exactly well. There's another framing that goes alongside it that is a little different, and that is noticing when you come home from work and your partner or spouse, children say something that aggravates you, then you can express your anger freely. You're in your home. That's not right. You can't say that, or you need to clean your room, or whatever the thing is. The anger expresses freely. But if you're in the workplace and your boss does something that you can see clearly they're creating their own mess, and the anger comes up, it's caught by something that's a more cautious, like, this isn't the place to express that way. So
right.
It's like, oh, wait a minute. How do I know the difference, right? In this case, in the house, my anger is me more freely. In the case at work, my anger is a part of me. I'm not giving it the full reins of me to express, right? It doesn't have, if you've seen the movie Inside Out, you'll know this. If you haven't, I urge you to go watch that movie, because it's important. Like, the parts of as emotions, as archetypes of emotions, when anger takes the control board, anger can speak off camera, kind of when anger is not driving, and say, I think this deserves a response.
Yeah.
And the more calm parts of ourselves can say, hold on, anger, maybe let's find out some more information first. But when we say, you're right, we all agree this requires a response, and anger gets on the control panel, then I am anger, right? And so it's like, and the coming into, like, anger getting into the driver's seat, and then afterwards can almost be regretful right afterwards. See the harm that anger has done. It's like, oh my God, I did not mean to hurt that much. That was more fire than I intended. Anger can come out, and shame can come in and drive. Oh, my anger drove me to say something that was too much, and now I'm scared about my too muchness. I wish that I hid some of myself.
Right. And it's kind of like leads me to think of how the response to social justice, like people who have an issue with social justice, where, like, I guess there's all kinds of different reactions people could have. I think there's certain people that they are like, I never express my anger. I shove that down. You need to do the same. There's other people that their anger takes over them and they do really terrible things. And they just think, if other people have anger, they're going to do those same dangerous things. How could you have anger at the same time be rational? And so there's a way, I think, we're kind of like negotiating how we are as a society, but it's still, we're not quite talking. It's like there's these certain things that maybe we're not quite aware of, that, oh, people could be with their anger in a different way than I'm with my anger.
Right.
And that's not necessarily what, like, somebody, I could see somebody saying, Shane, that's not my issue with social justice. I'm actually being rational and pointing to certain things. I'm fine with my anger. And yes, that you are also, you're right. It's just really tough. What I tend to see is that when I like go into my Facebook and I see different people arguing about whatever group, what I see is they're kind of pointing to the lowest common denominator of the group. There's, you know, Sally, who's like hangry because she's starting a new diet and she's going off the rails at work about something, and it's like, oh, that represents all of social justice. And there's like someone else who's like racist and like slaps butts at work.
Yeah.
And they represent all of, I don't know, conservatism or something. And it's like, no, those are certain people. What they're doing is, I don't want to use the word wrong. They're in need of growth and could use some help in developing. But let's not like diminish all of what this group is trying to say and is trying to add to our collective awareness. Let's not try to diminish that as just like Sally from work.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I would say that it's not quite wrong. That wrong's the wrong word for it. What comes to mind is partial. It's partial.
Yeah.
It's a partial thing that needs to be expressed. And in the moment of its expression, it believes it's enough of the whole to say, this is what matters.
Right.
It almost can't recognize its partiality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, that kind of makes sense. There's that part of how do I express it? If like, do I have to resolve all of the partiality to get the wholeness? Well, that's not going to be possible. But this thing is a problem right now. So I'm going to speak this, right? My hunger and my anger associated with my hunger is what's driving me. And I need to speak this thing that you've inflamed my anger, right? It has a hair trigger right now, and you cross the line on that hair, right? Boom, Here it comes. There's something too that I want to name that's really, that I've learned. This was the hardest lesson for me to learn in becoming a facilitator for circling, is to feel the innocence of the expression of that part. It's something that Jordan has mentioned many times. Jordan Allen is who taught me and taught you. Actually, you learned circling elsewhere as well, but
mostly Jordan.
Yeah, but that innocence was always kind of a surprise to me, because there's something like, oh, I want to cut that part out, whatever the part is, the partiality that can distort the wholeness of what's happening. I want to cut that partiality out because it's confusing. It's taking up too much of the attention and reinforcing the feeling of partiality, like that partness is most important. But when I feel the innocence of it, it's like, oh, of course this part needs a voice.
Right.
And of course, in this moment, it thinks it's the only voice that matters.
Right.
That makes sense. And then I can have compassion for myself and my own defensiveness, and my compassion for them and their rage or whatever it is that they're experiencing, to meet them and find, oh, there's something else here too. Now that I see the innocence of it, I can include more of the wholeness. Whereas if I try to squash that partness, there's no room for more wholeness. It's so obvious after having done this for a long time, and so counterintuitive at first.
Yeah, I think if you're confused, if there's a listener confused about like, what are they talking about, partiality versus wholeness, I think maybe a good example would be that 10 years ago, we cared about things that we no longer care about now. Like 10 years ago, it was so real. An example that comes up for me was, I don't know how many years, 15, something when I was like 1-digit-year-old. It was so real to me that I wanted to open the car door. I did not want my mom to open the car door for me. It was so real. And right now, if she did that, just absolutely nothing would come up. And so there's a way, it's like, no, back then I'm like, I want to prove that I'm autonomous. I want to prove that I can do things for myself. And now that's just so like obvious that I can do that. Like I live on my own, I'm on career, all this stuff. I'm turning 32, that it's just like, oh, I don't need to prove that anymore. There's a part that I needed to prove existed. I needed to be in it so much that it makes room for itself before it could just be integrated with my whole being, where I don't even remember, like nothing even comes up, that nothing comes up that I need to, well, at least it probably takes other forms,
Yeah.
like, no boss, I can send my own email. Like it probably continually takes a different form, but not through car doors being opened for me.
Yeah. I love it too. That's a personal example, and the example that came up to me was a little bit more civilizational, kind of large scale, which was you're maybe too young about this, and it's funny to think about that, but the Y2K problem. Before the year 2000, we worried
that
immensely about the possibility that we had miscoded dates inside of computer programs, so that everything was going to shut down on January 1st, 2000.
Right.
And it was like it was a big concern.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, not a big deal now. We don't even think about it. It's hardly, there are people that don't even remember that was a big concern at some point.
And at the same point, it's manifested into like, we need to be really responsible with AI.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm totally not dismissing that as the same thing. It's like,
well, it has a similar flavor in that the bigness of the concern makes it hard to pay attention to the nuance of the problem. Right.
Yeah.
This is actually a perfect example. And I don't know if there was a comedian, a female comedian at the beginning of COVID, early in COVID days, that was her post-COVID self, going back 3 months to her pre-COVID self. And her hair was all messed up, kind of like mine. She wasn't wearing a suit, and she was like trying to talk to her pre-COVID self and said, "Hey, something's coming. I think you should probably know about it." And the pre-COVID self was like, "Well, yeah, no, I'm very busy. I have all this travel." Says, "Yeah, you're not going to be traveling." So, what do you mean I'm not going to be traveling? Of course I'm going to be traveling. I have my agendas booked up. It says, "Yeah, that's not important." And it's like, from that pre-COVID self, trying to imagine how much we were going to change was kind of amazing.
Oh, for sure.
And it was very humorous to look at how the concerns had shifted so dramatically in ways that we couldn't possibly imagine in only 3 months. The funny thing was, she did a follow-on video another 3 months after that, when the riots were happening and Trump was holding the Bible upside down and people were going crazy about that. Not to go on either side of that, I can't help it a little bit, but the thing of coming up in 6 months, it's like, "Oh, I need to talk to you again. Remember when I came to talk to you before?" Yeah. She goes, "Oh, is COVID bad?" "COVID. Oh, yeah, that's right." It's like, wait a minute, COVID's not the biggest problem? Yeah, no, you would think it would be, but yeah, right in this moment, COVID's not the biggest problem. It's like, what? How can something bigger than COVID take more of my attention than COVID did? Right.
I've been having this thought for a while. I think there's partially this kind of revolution coming with the millennials of, maybe it's just in the circles I'm a part of, but kind of being anti-news. Like, we need to stop listening to news, stop watching news. And there's a way that I do want some kind of study or something done where each individual, they like write down something. It's like, this is so big. This is going to completely impact my life. I'm so glad I watched the news today. And kind of in a scientific way, notice how negatively it impacts their emotion. And then just check back a week later and see, was this actually relevant to my life at all?
Right.
And just kind of notice a study of these things. And now, to balance that out on the other side, so I stopped watching the news. I wasn't aware of things, and I had to have friends text me saying, "Hey, there's a hurricane coming."
Yeah,
which is important. And so there's certain things I missed out on. Luckily, I had friends that would watch the news, and so I get to export my stress nervous system to someone else who's going to do all that work to refine it and say, this is actually something important enough to tell Shane.
Yeah.
But there's a way, it's like kind of looking at, okay, it feels so real, this is important, but is it actually?
It's really amazing. I'm curious about your experience as we're talking about this, because I'm lit up and excited. Like my legs are tingling and my arms, like I feel like this, if I were going to grant a sensation to it that's similar, it's sort of like being on the bus that's headed to the ski slope. I know I'm getting ready to head to the slopes. It's like anticipation of engagement. Is the feeling that I have. What we're talking about here feels so alive to me, and has felt very difficult and challenging to know how to engage. But the way that we've talked about it here today makes me like, oh, this isn't too big. I think I could ski a double black diamond slope today.
Yeah.
I might get some bruises. I'm going to take some tumble down the hill, but I think I can actually navigate this level of conversation and have a reasonable chance of getting down the mountain in one piece.
Right. It's kind of strange for me with this conversation. Partially, it's like, you know, I'm with my roommates. We're all working from home. So I'm aware of the noises happening in the background as a truck just comes by and as the doors open and closing. So it's partially that. And there's kind of like a professionalism I'm like, already feel like I'm not quite living up to. And I could have just gone to a room that's more soundproofed. This is like a way that I am, as my roommate pops into the video. I'm not even sure if we're going to use video, if we're going to just use audio. So this is like kind of some things of where are we going with this?
Yeah.
There's some awareness that because we contexted this as, hey, it's the first try, we're kind of like figuring out what this is, that I'm recognizing there's some like room for messing up, like some forgiveness that is helping me argue with my perfectionism. I think that's like I'm not quite at wholeness with my perfectionism because my parts are arguing, which is a step towards wholeness of just like, no, I can just relax. So partially that's happening. There's a way I'm excited with the flow. It feels creative. It feels unbounded in what we're exploring. I think there are nuggets of things that people could hear and they would have their own creative ideas, and it's just kind of hopefully fun to listen to. And there's a way that I think what I'm missing, kind of like what we're explicitly missing, is the bounds of what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Kind of like it's almost like I know the words masculine, feminine mean different things to different people, but archetypically like
yin yang.
Yeah, yin yang. Like there's the way it's like my yin wants to flow within a yang, and we don't quite know the yang yet. We have to be within the yin to figure out what the yang is. I'm saying yang is the boundaries and yin is the flow, the river. And so I feel the creativity, and there's like a thing of, oh, I want it to be clear beforehand to the listener if this is something that would match their interests.
Yeah.
I don't quite know what we're talking about. So I don't quite know the context to give them of, hey, if you're not interested in meditation, if you're not interested in communication, this is not for you. Or if you are interested in meditation, if you are interested in communicating, in integrating different sides so that we can mediate conflicts better, then this is for you.
Yeah. It's funny. This is probably too big an idea to put at the tail end of this, because we're getting, my sense is we're coming to a close. It's coming up to the top of the hour.
Wow, already.
I know it. Hard to believe, right? But the word participation pops into my head. Hello? And then my mind makes a funny kind of a thing with, oh, participation. It is the part dancing with the whole in a way. And there's a way that circling in this conversation is my part dancing with your part, feeling the bounds and flow of the whole in this moment. And it's like, I love that. That feels good. And it's tricky because we don't know what it is in advance. We didn't prepare this set of topics. And it feels completely congruous with what I'm interested in talking about right now.
Yeah. In a way, I hope inspiring to a listener that's like, I want to start a podcast and I don't know how to start. It's like, here's what it looks like to start without knowing what you're doing. So
Yeah.
if
I would,
if you
to
could forgive
context,
us and listen to this far,
yeah.
then that is reason enough alone to jump into something that you are not quite sure what it is yet, but have some kind of creative passion around.
Yeah. It is funny because what you and I know that that somebody listening to this doesn't know is that really is true. Like we've had
Yeah.
4 conversations where we said, are we going to do the podcast? And then,
Yeah.
okay, put it on the calendar. Here it is. Boom, it's done. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm ready. Well, we'll find out.
Yeah. And it's like, just so y'all know, I am a perfectionist in that I feel so much judgment. I can't re-listen to my own voice. I just can't. It's like I have too much self-judgment. But there's a way, like we especially know, and we found out in circling, it's somehow just easier to love someone else than ourselves. And so if someone else is struggling with something, it's just so much easier. Oh, I'm going to send you love. In a circle yesterday, we're in this group, 10 people, and somebody was just saying like, man, I just feel like I don't fit in and I want to fit in. And someone else says, like later on, like 20 minutes later, oh, I just want a matter here. And the person that says want to fit in is like, oh, I'm feeling so much love and compassion and you totally matter. And it's like, oh, but you can't tell yourself that, and I'm not judging him. I'm like, I can't tell myself that. It's so much easier to love someone else. It's like, oh, I always hope that somebody is there struggling with what I'm struggling with, so I could love them and then in return love myself.
Yeah.
Because it's just for some reason so much easier.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. There's some kind of possibly an egoic part of it, but it's also just like a mental physiological thing. Like you can't tickle yourself, right? There's some way that you can't quite give yourself the love that you need and the way that it can be received. It has to be in relationship. So yeah.
Absolutely. Example.
Very awesome. It's interesting. This didn't go quite the way that I was thinking on the question and answer. It was really more an exploration, but it felt perfect.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised because I was expecting to at least get 2 questions in about trust as a technology. And we just jumped right in.
Yeah.
There's a way it's like I think the things I was most nervous about was we tend to talk fast, and we didn't. Maybe some people like, no, you talk fast, but in my mind, it was like, no, trust me, you see us alone, we talk fast. But I think we did well here, and so there's like a perfectionist part of me. It's like so calm down, like I didn't quite feel ready coming in, and then I'm like, oh, cool, this feels good. If I re-listen to this, I would be like, no, you weren't ready, but no, this feels good.
Yeah, awesome. So I don't know exactly what the form of this is in the future. My I was going to say expectation, but that's not the right word. My intuition is that you and I have more conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's more depth here, especially the feedback that you've given me on some of the initial talks that I've done on trust as a technology.
Yeah.
You have some context for what it is that I'm trying to do. And how it's impacting you. So it's like, I love that energy coming back because I haven't really been able to speak with the depth of it and the nuance of it. And it feels like circling is the perfect meta context in which to start asking these questions. So I love that. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you and I have, it's in our value set, like clarity, that we want to have a clear map. And it's just not the kind of passion or value that a lot of people have, but there are people that want a clearer map and want to export the work of that to others and listen to the findings. And I hope that we are meeting that.
Agreed. All right. Thanks, Shane. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, excited to do it again.
All right, cool.